Oliver Cromwell, a skilled cavalry commander, played a crucial role in leading Parliament's army during the English Civil War. Following his victories over the King's legions, he assumed the position of Lord Protector, governing over England, Scotland, and Ireland. Cromwell was awarded the latter title for life after the bloody conclusion of the English Civil Wars and the execution of King Charles I of England. Cromwell, a Puritan and radical, believed that his numerous battlefield victories in the British Isles were a divine commission from God to liberate the people from a tyrannical king. Even to this day, Cromwell continues to be a controversial figure with differing views on his legacy. He is regarded by some as a political visionary and military genius, while others see him as a religious fanatic, heartless invader, and regicidal despot. Oliver Cromwell, born on April 25, 1599, was the son of Robert Cromwell, a humble country gentleman, and Elizabeth Stewart. Oliver grew up in Huntingdon before he spent a year at Cambridge University. Cromwell entered marriage with Elizabeth Berkshire on August 22, 1620. Together, they were blessed with 7 children, with their eldest son Richard becoming particularly renowned as he took over leadership in England following his father's passing. In 1628, he served as a member of Parliament, representing the district of Cambridgeshire. However, King Charles I closed Parliament, and Oliver had to return to his life in the countryside. In the 1630s, Cromwell, who was making a living as a farmer, experienced a religious conversion. From that point forward, his speeches and writings consistently reflected a strong pious fervor. Cromwell, a devoted Puritan, maintained a modest and unpretentious lifestyle. He dressed in a simple manner and engaged in traditional activities like hunting and falconry. During the mid-1630s, his wealth grew significantly when he inherited a substantial sum of money following his uncle's death. In 1640, when Parliament reconvened, Cromwell resumed his position as a Member of Parliament representing Cambridge. In July 1642, England was plunged into civil war after a long period of political rows and unfulfilled commitments between Parliament and King Charles I. The structural disagreements between the two factions revolved around financial matters, religious beliefs, and the distribution of political authority. The opposing factions in the Civil War were commonly referred to as the Roundheads and the King's Knights. During the initial years of the war, most parliamentarians aimed to persuade the king to recognize the irrationality of his actions and advocated for certain limitations to be imposed on his powers by Parliament. They had not yet made the decision to abolish the monarchy. In 1642, Cromwell joined the army of the Eastern Association of Parliament as a cavalry captain. This was led by Edward Montague, Earl of Manchester. Cromwell commanded his own troop, which grew due to the wealth he had inherited from his estates. Due to the exceptional leadership skills and several battlefield triumphs, he achieved the esteemed position of a cavalry commander. Cromwell was known for his strict discipline and saw himself as a divine instrument against a corrupt king. As put by historian T. Hunt, Cromwell placed immense importance on the merit of each soldier. He said that he preferred having a plain red-haired captain in a coat who truly understands the cause he fights for and his genuine passion, rather than a so-called gentleman who lacks substance. Cromwell's personal regiment of heavy cavalry, known as the Ironsides, was exceptionally formidable, consisting of 14 soldiers. The Battle of Edgehill in October 1642, the first major clash of the Civil War, resulted in an indecisive outcome. This lack of progress would come to characterize the prolonged conflict. The First Battle of Newbury, which took place in September 1643, resulted in yet another draw. The stalemate was disappointing, to say the least, considering that Parliament had control over most of the resources and the capital, as well as the Royal Navy. The Battle of Marston Moor near York in July 1644 was a significant turning point in the conflict, as it marked a victory for the Roundheads. It was during this battle that Oliver Cromwell first emerged as a prominent figure, leading a cavalry wing. Unfortunately, he sustained a neck injury, which obliged him to temporarily withdraw from the battlefield. In those days, it was extremely challenging to command cavalry and maintain the formation of mounted troops after one attack to launch a second one on another part of the battlefield. Cromwell employed this tactic multiple times throughout the war. Despite suffering a defeat at Marston Moor, King Charles displayed resilience by continuing to fight and even securing victories. However, it was the Second Battle of Newbury in October 1644, which ended inconclusively, that convinced Parliament of the need to implement significant changes within the armies to secure victory. At the Battle of Newbury, the monarchists were at a numerical disadvantage, being outnumbered 2-1. However, the lack of coordination among the parliamentary commanders highlighted the necessity for a change in strategy. Cromwell did not experience his usual success at Newbury. Parliament initiated an official inquiry into the disaster that occurred during the clash. The Earl of Manchester faced criticism for his lack of proactivity during the battle. In response, he accused Cromwell of disloyalty, leading to a duel between the two men. In December 1644, Cromwell made a call for a more professional army and a comprehensive approach to warfare during his time in Parliament. In February 1645, the new modern army was formed and funded through taxation. It was considered professional because it provided pay, training, and a clear hierarchy. A fascinating fact is that soldiers were not only given bullets, although they sometimes were forcibly hit by them, they also received printed Bibles and catechisms that emphasized the cause for which they were fighting. Every regiment had chaplains who conducted regular sermons and prayer meetings. In April, Parliament passed the Self-Denying Ordinance, a motion that prohibited any of its members from holding the position of a military commander. The outcome was the removal of politically powerful commanders who lacked military competence. The Earl of Manchester was targeted by this policy. Well, following the reshuffle, the responsibility of commanding the model army was entrusted to Sir Thomas Fairfax, 1612 to 1671, a highly skilled and experienced activist. Oliver Cromwell, at his own insistence, appointed him second in command, disregarding the ordinance. The parliamentarians made a crucial decision during the war by establishing a standing army that could be deployed whenever and for however long necessary to secure victory. The Battle of Naseby in June 1645 marked the inaugural test of the new model army. King Charles personally led the troops, but the new army had superior numbers and tactics, with Cromwell's cavalry once again demonstrating exceptional skill. In fact, the commander even lost his helmet during the battle. The infantry of the monarchists was destroyed, resulting in the capture of thousands of prisoners. However, the most significant development was the seizure of King Charles's correspondence. This proved that he had no intention of engaging in negotiations to bring an end to the war. Furthermore, it revealed his willingness to strike a deal with the Irish rebels to bolster his army with their support. However, the king himself managed to escape and lived to fight another day. After initially fleeing to the north of England, he was eventually handed over to Parliament by a Scottish army. He managed to escape from his prison and found refuge on the Isle of Wight. From there, he was left to plan the scope of the war. The Battle of Preston, from August 17th to 20th, 1648, marked another significant victory for the parliamentary forces. Cromwell, as the leader of the new army, faced off against a larger Scottish contingent. The Scots had hoped that Charles's restoration would bring about the promotion of the Presbyterian Church in Scotland and England. However, they were ultimately defeated, resulting in the capture and subsequent imprisonment of the king. Cromwell recaptured the northern region of England on behalf of Parliament. Many people could no longer tolerate Charles. He was a king who had fought against his own people in war. In 1648, a coup occurred in Parliament, resulting in fewer MPs and a near-complete purge of the House of Commons. By exploiting this loophole, the king was brought to trial, found guilty, and subsequently executed on January 30th, 1649. Cromwell's signature was the third one on the death sentence. In March, Parliament formally abolished the institution of the monarchy and the House of Lords. The Church of England underwent a reform, and the British crown jewels were sold. Afterwards, England underwent an unprecedented transformation and became a republic. But the monarchy was not abolished in Scotland. In February 1649, the eldest son of the late King Charles automatically assumed the title of Charles II of Scotland. The Scots supported Charles with the intention of safeguarding the Presbyterian Church in their land. As a condition for their military support, they requested that the king commit to advancing the interests of the church in England should he ascend to the throne there. In England, there was also individuals who considered Charles as their rightful ruler, despite his exile to another country. The civil wars had not yet concluded. The third round commenced, and it was the Scottish threat that once again prompted the mobilization of the new model army. However, prior to addressing the Scots, Cromwell took charge of a 12,000-strong army and ventured into Ireland to effectively suppress a royalist rebellion with great severity. He achieved resounding victories. His reputation was tarnished thereafter due to accusations of extreme violence against captured soldiers and hundreds of needless civilian deaths in the Irish campaign. Meanwhile, the Scots continued to rally around Charles II and had a significant army stationed in Edinburgh. Parliament made the decision to deploy the new model army to Scotland to eliminate the threat completely. Fairfax disagreed and subsequently resigned from his position. Cromwell assumed the role and personally led the army. He made 2 attempts to capture Edinburgh in July and August of 1650. In the end, Cromwell managed to transform what initially appeared to be a potential disaster into a decisive triumph. He achieved this by defeating the Scottish cavalry and infantry in a glorious victory at the Battle of Dunbar. Afterwards, Cromwell successfully conquered Edinburgh Castle on Christmas Eve. However, the Scots remained determined and officially crowned Charles II on New Year's Day in 1651. In a final, desperate attempt, Charles ordered his army to invade England. However, they were swiftly and decisively defeated by Cromwell on December 3, 1651. The Scottish Parliament was dissolved, and its representatives were sent to the Westminster Parliament. Cromwell accomplished something that no other English king had ever achieved. He successfully united Britain into a single political entity. The civil wars had ended. After the Civil War, the situation was far from perfect. There were significant divisions that persisted within Britain. There was still a disagreement between Parliament and the army, and there were only a few people who could agree on the best way to move forward without a monarchy. But Cromwell managed to assert his authority. On April 20th, 1653, he went to Parliament and told the MPs about his belief that they were unfit to govern. After that, the Parliament closed. On December 16th, 1653, Cromwell was appointed as the Lord Protector of England, Scotland, and Ireland by a newly formed Parliament, considerably smaller than its predecessor. The Republic was organized into military districts, with each being led by a major general. But Cromwell's specific brand of militarism and Puritanism was not widely embraced. While there was an increase in religious tolerance during this time, it is important to note that Catholics were still excluded. Additionally, there were some concerning radical developments. The celebrations of Christmas and Easter were abolished. There were also regulations regarding clothing, swearing, and various aspects of daily life that individuals were unaccustomed to having others intervene in. Some still sympathized with a monarchical system and aimed to achieve wealth equality and expand suffrage. There were other minor revolts, but they were ruthlessly crushed. Parliament's intention to make Cromwell king was not driven by a desire to gain favor, but rather by the belief that they could exercise better control over him as a constitutional monarch. Anything would have been better than a dictator who arbitrarily created rules as he pleased. The army stubbornly refused to support a new king, considering the time they had spent fighting the previous one. Cromwell himself declined the title, but he did consent to being sworn in again as Lord Protector, this time with grandeur. After a plot to assassinate Cromwell was uncovered in January 1657, the question of his successor became a topic of discussion. The proposed solution was to grant the Lord Protector the authority to appoint his successor. Cromwell's appointment on June 26, 1657, bore a striking resemblance to a coronation, much like the ones that had taken place in the past. Cromwell was seated in the customary coronation chair and adorned with an imperial purple robe, a sword, and a scepter. The dignitaries gathered and enthusiastically exclaimed, "God save the Lord Protector." The only thing that was absent was a crown, although it was prominently featured on Cromwell's coins and Great Seal. Foreign rulers observed with horror the violent events in England, including the king's execution. However, despite witnessing these events, none of them provided any assistance to the monarchy following Charles' death. Cromwell managed to achieve some progress in his dealings with foreign nations, particularly Spain and the Netherlands. The Lord Protector's foreign policy yielded mixed results, but his strategic investment in the Royal Navy played a crucial role in positioning Britain as one of the dominant global powers in the following century. At the peak of his abilities, surpassing any previous monarch, Cromwell faced a challenge that even he could not overcome: poor health. On September 3, 1658, he passed away due to pneumonia at Whitehall Palace. He was honored with a state funeral befitting that of a king. The army vehemently opposed Cromwell's attempts to appoint an heir and establish hereditary succession for his office. However, despite the resistance, he ultimately made the decision on his deathbed. Richard, his son, was selected as Lord Protector, but he lacked the qualities to effectively handle the powerful forces of the army and parliament, symbolized by two fierce lions. In May 1659, a group of junior officers defied orders and aligned themselves with Parliament by voting to abolish the Protectorate. Due to internal divisions and the absence of a unifying leader, the army was unable to take significant action. In the following year, when confronted with a clear-cut decision, being reinstating a monarchy or plunging into another civil war, Parliament, under the influence of General George Monk, voted in favor of restoring the monarchy. In May 1660, Charles returned to England and assumed the title of Charles II. He was invited to rule alongside the House of Lords and the House of Commons. All the Acts of Parliament enacted by Oliver Cromwell were reversed, signifying the demise of the Republic. Cromwell's afterlife was anything but quiet, or at least his body wasn't. In 1661, his remains were exhumed from Westminster Abbey. His body was treated as one of a traitor, with the corpse being hanged and beheaded. The intention was to display the remains publicly as a warning to those who aspired to be king without a crown.